Okay, guys, I think it's a pretty healthy audience. Thank you everyone for coming. I think let's get this going. Yeah, I would like to thank everybody for coming. We realized coming to things IRL is a rather large commitment, especially for a crypto community. And to see this many people here today, it is actually really awesome. So, in line with the upcoming release of the all-new IDEX, we will be hosting regular community town halls for all the updates you need on our project. So it's not just leading up to, but also leading on from the release. So we are aiming for a 2-week cadence on these gatherings, but we may adjust that depending on the feedback from you guys, our community. So in a little bit plainer English, we're going to be doing these things every 2 weeks. So if there is any alpha to be found, this is the place to find it. If you guys have been paying attention to our comms, then you will also know that we will be handing out a handful of very special rewards, and those will only be available right here in the community town hall. Okay, so just gonna give a quick little warning to Alex and everybody else that'll be presenting. I'm about to hand it off to you guys, but just before I do that, I would just like to say uh, Alex will be explaining things, what's going on with the new IDEX, and while he explains, I'm sure you guys will have questions. So as he speaks, please feel free to drop the questions in the chat. What will happen is, at the end of Alex speaking, we will come back and answer some of these questions. Now, the highest quality, most intelligent questions that are the most relatable to what is being said will be acknowledged with a limited edition Pope NFT. Now, these come in limited quantities only, so please do not spam. When Moon and When Lambo will not be rewarded or even answered. And what's going to happen at the end is Carlo or Laura, and I repeat, only Carlo or Laura from IDEX will DM you with instructions on how to claim your prize. So I hope everybody's excited. Those popes are exclusive to this town hall, and you can only get it here and only for this edition too. And these may or may not have future utility. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And on that note, I'm wondering if Alex is ready to begin.
Hey, thank you, Anwar, for that intro. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
All right, great. Before I go talking to myself. Well, cool. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Awesome to see the attendance. I think this is double the last time we did a town hall. I recall it being around 30. And just to see that number double in just a few short months is pretty awesome. This is, as Anwar said, our first town hall of the year. Our goal with these is to be more transparent about what's going on within the company, both development efforts, but also things we've got planned in terms of marketing, growth initiatives, and an opportunity to really engage the community in a conversation about what we're doing and how we're moving forward. Kind of in line with that, we've been spending really the last year heads down working on this new version of IDEX and revealed for the first time a little bit more about how this version is going to work on Monday, along with new things like our new branding, both the visual design as well as terminology, this concept of a layer 3 derivatives exchange. So wanted to take the opportunity to talk through the presentation, or I guess the slides that we created and shared on our Twitter, to give everyone a little more detail on what we mean by some of these terms, these definitions, elaborate a bit on where we are in the development process and timelines, and then give an opportunity to open up for questions. But before I do, just wanted to again thank everyone for attending. Thanks, Anwar, in particular, and the marketing team for hosting this. And a big shout out to Bartek, our designer, for the amazing design work that you're going to see, or that you may have already seen via the slides that we shared on Twitter in this presentation. All right, so I'm going to start my screen share. 1 second. Okay, is this visible? Can someone confirm?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay, so yes, again, want to run through the slides and just give you guys a little bit more insight into what's going on behind the scenes and what we mean about the layer 3 derivatives exchange. So the goal of IDEX Layer 3 is pretty simple. It's to make an exchange that doesn't make a trade-off between performance or security. And this is really a vision that we've been working on since we started IDEX 6 years ago. blockchains inherently give up performance for security. If you think about the concept of a blockchain, it's having everyone globally be able to connect to this network, validate and replicate transactions, knowing that's going to be a more cumbersome, slower, more expensive process, but that the benefits you get from a security perspective, in particular, this idea of assets that can be transferred anywhere in the world to anyone with an internet connection, those trade-offs because of the properties that you get from a blockchain. So there's this tension in particular between a trading platform, which has a lot of components that require performance or throughput, and the underlying technology, which intentionally limits those properties in order to get these security benefits. So that's really what we've been focused on, and we're excited because the technology, as well as our use and ability to develop the technology, has gotten to a point where we can actually combine these things, create an exchange that gives the user experience that users demand without asking them to give up those security benefits. And I think we're now at a pretty interesting time in crypto. You know, if you had asked people a few years ago about decentralized exchanges, many didn't see the need for self-custody or better custody solutions. And in 2022, if there was one phrase that really kind of captured it, it was counterparty risk. And so that's really what we're trying to do here, is give an amazing trading experience that feels like you're on one of the top centralized exchanges, but without introducing that counterparty risk. And so that's really about this concept of zero compromises. We want the performance that matches any existing centralized exchange, can go toe to toe with them from a user experience perspective, but bringing in the self-custody and transparency benefits that can only be achieved by using smart contracts for custody and settlement. So think of it as any premier futures exchange, but you log in with your wallet rather than a username password, and you're always in control of your funds. And this really allows us, having this, kind of achieve this technically, allows us to also be competitive on fees, because that's one of the key components for the user experience, is making sure that you're not paying exorbitant fees, whether that's on the trading side, trading fees themselves, or in terms of network settlement costs. It's not going to work if every trade requires a $100 gas fee in order to get that settled and executed. So a little bit more about the layer 3 solution. And first, kind of a primer on the layered concept of blockchains. So most people are familiar with the concept of L1s and L2s. L1 being the base Ethereum layer. This is the layer that is the most secure because it's kind of replicating that data and information to every node around the world. But it's also the most expensive because of this redundancy. So the last 5 years, everyone's been focused on how do we scale this base layer in a way that allows users to get cheaper transactions, better performance, higher throughput, but doesn't require trade-offs in security. And that's really been the evolution of layer 2s. These work by batching transactions, make a small trade-off in order to have big gains in terms of settlement costs. Layer 3 is all about extending that concept to a particular application. It's about understanding the nature of the application, in this case, our perpetuals exchange platform, how we can identify certain trade-offs that can be made that allow us to get a better UX, better performance, cheaper settlement, but without sacrificing that thing that's ultimately important to users, which is that self-custody and transparency that comes from using smart contracts. So for the IDEX app, layer 3 consists of really two components. There's the off-chain application. This is the operations of essentially of the exchange, the brains of the platform. If you think about a trading engine, even if you don't really know much about exchanges, just think about your experience on an exchange. There's a ton of activity. Can be thousands of orders per second. You've got users interacting through the web client, through the website, or through the API, taking in a ton of different information, and it's very responsive. Everything's happening very quickly. And that's a very resource-intensive process. If you run these types of applications on chain, you either have to make major trade-offs in cost, performance, or throughput. So you're going to have a degradation in the quality of the experience if you bring that fully onto a blockchain network. So the solution for us is to keep these things off chain in the app layer, this trading engine, the UI, some other concepts around instant trading. But as every action that happens in this off-chain system is accompanied by a signature from the user's private key. So the idea is that you can kind of collect these signatures during the process of trading, during the process of interacting with this off-chain application, such that when we go to the network for settlement, everything is verified and validated that the user did approve this transaction, that the price and the amount that they entered was correct, essentially confirming that the user actually agreed to these transactions, which ultimately means that no funds can move without explicit approval from the user. You retain that benefit of self-custody, but by designing it in such a way that from the user's perspective, the trading part of the experience doesn't feel like you're sacrificing or trading off in terms of performance and throughput. One last concept here that I did want to call out is this idea of delegated keys. We're super excited about this innovation. The idea is very similar to API keys on centralized exchanges, where you can have one that is kind of a master key to your account that can actually move funds in and out of the account, others that can only do things like place or cancel trades. So we've introduced this same concept into a decentralized exchange. Your custody key, whether that's a hardware wallet or a software wallet, can be used to authorize these delegated keys that can only perform trading actions. These delegated keys can then live either in your browser, so that every time you click place an order or cancel an order, you don't have to then wait for the pop-up, sign it in MetaMask, or go to your hardware wallet and do the confirmations. It happens instantly. So really kind of in line with that trading experience that everyone's used to. It also allows us to take these delegated keys and put them in other applications, in particular trading terminals. I would never recommend someone put their custody private key into a third-party application. That's just really not good security OPSEC especially if you're using something like a hardware wallet. But on the other hand, this concept of segregating just the trading key really limits the risk in case anything were to happen with that third-party application. Trades can be authorized on your behalf, but they can't withdraw or take any of the underlying funds. So just another cool innovation that we're bringing that's helping make this user experience in line with what everybody's used to and what everybody is kind of using today. And then the second component of the layer 3 solution is on the settlement side. So as I mentioned earlier, layer 2s have been a big industry-wide innovation that help reduce the cost of settlement, but they're still not scalable or cheap enough for order book dexes. And to understand why, just think of the comparison of an order book versus a swap trading platform. When you make a trade on an order book exchange, your order may be executed across many different limit orders. You get matched with the best prices available, and that could be a number of other traders or different orders broken up from the same trader. Could be tens or even hundreds of different executions and ultimately settlement transactions. And if you compare that with a swap, which has just a single transaction regardless of size, you have this issue of ever increasing fixed costs associated with the settlement of order book based trading. So it's really critical for our design and for the quality user experience to have settlement costs that are ultimately a small fraction of the overall cost of operating the platform. And that's what we've achieved by this layer 3 component on-chain settlement. The idea is to identify further trade-offs that can be made, in this case around the data associated with transactions. By keeping that data off-chain, you're able to get another 50 to 100x improvement in the cost of settlement, to the point where those costs can actually be absorbed into the trading fee structure and create a gas-free settlement experience. And we think this is really critical to being able to bring over a large swath of users, is being able to match not only that user experience from a kind of the performance and actions perspective, but also from a fees perspective. Because if you come over and it looks and feels great, but then you're paying 10 times as much as you were at an alternative product, it's going to be really hard to make that trade-off when you're kind of comparing those clear financial costs associated with it. So really excited about this development as well, because it allows us to really have true parity across the board. So a bit about our progress. So this is a slide that we've created that we've shown before, and we're working to keep this updated as much as possible anytime there's major developments in these different components. The goal here was to kind of peel back a little bit and give a perspective on all the different pieces that go into building this platform. And this is still not comprehensive, but it's the majority of them. As you can see, we are either done with the individual builds or reaching completion with the individual builds. We've started the integration process, which just means taking all of these things that were built and tested and developed in isolation and starting to connect them for the end-to-end process. So an example would be if you create an order, well, that needs to show up in the order book service. If you have an order that's executed, it needs to go through the trading engine. If you have an order that's a result of a margin calculation and liquidation, well, that's handled by liquidation service and sent through the trading engine. All of these different pieces need to work together to make the perpetuals exchange functional. And that's kind of the process and the step that we're at today. And one of the things that we did want to answer today is Wen IDEX Layer3. And in some ways, this is actually a very difficult question to answer. And it's challenging for two reasons. One is that we don't know what we don't know. And by that, I mean, we're building something brand new here. There's pieces that have never been developed by any software developer in the world. And it's hard to know what things we're going to come across along the way. So some of these things have been coming up in the audit process, for example. We've identified a few components that weren't quite ready for prime time in terms of either features that are available within the Ethereum kind of EVM that have now been flagged in the audit that we want to incorporate. That requires some additional rework, but it's way better than the alternative of launching the application and only then finding out that there's something that we wanted to include, a feature that will allow us to do cool new things in the future. So that's one of the things, is just this development process inherently brings up new things along the way. The second piece is that as we're getting closer to launch, we're trying to decide, this concept of an MVP, a minimum viable product. What's the cutoff of where we say this is the product that we want to reveal to the world? And we think we have an opportunity to really make a splash with something that is going to wow users. And so there are things that we've identified kind of late stage that we've decided are important enough to delay the launch in order to incorporate. So one good example is the concept of cross-chain bridging. So we've developed the application and incorporated cross-chain bridges such that you can deposit with one single transaction from any of the major layer 2s in the EVM compatible ecosystem. So whether your funds are on Polygon or Optimism or Arbitrum, you'll be able to sign one single transaction, move your funds over and get them into the IDEX platform and be trading within minutes. Same on the withdrawal side. That's an example of something that's not critical for launch. We could launch the product without it, but we think it's a key component of presenting this product as something that doesn't make trade-offs and preventing users or saving them from the hassle of finding a bridge and understanding how the bridge works and all of the overhead that goes into moving across chains is something that's in line with this idea of really having just a top tier user experience. And in this case, it's pretty cool because it actually leads to a better experience than you have when depositing on centralized exchanges, where you have to find the address, copy paste it, make sure you don't make an error, kind of sweat when you actually do send the transaction and hope that you didn't make an error. So a great example of a small detail, something that we identified that we do want to incorporate and that we're kind of finding in this late stage and making the call to add that before we go live. Okay, last thing, just a reminder about the IDEX staking model. So if you're not familiar with the IDEX staking system, it's pretty straightforward. IDEX stakers operate a node, which is part of the application infrastructure. And for that work, IDEX stakers get 50% of all exchange fees collected by the trading platform. So we think this is a pretty clear and obvious value proposition for the IDEX token, something that's not seen in a lot of different protocols designs, and something that we're pretty excited about. We'll have more updates soon on the role that IDEX stakers will be playing in the IDEX Layer 3 exchange. And lastly here, I touched on much of what I wanted to with this roadmap slide. The key thing to highlight, mainnet launch, we're targeting sometime this summer. We're looking in the order of the next few months, but we did want to clarify that because we realized it was not clear from our Twitter thread. So apologies for not highlighting that as much as we could have. And again, the goal with this town hall is to really kick off this more open conversation. Coming on the backs of this, we're going to be providing weekly updates via the Discord on development progress, really going back to this slide, helping you understand how things are progressing. Also doing a job of communicating when we're adding new things, if there's anything that's coming up that's going to increase the scope of what we're building that wasn't anticipated. Again, we are all as excited as you are to bring this thing live. We've obviously been working behind the scenes, not only for the last year on the perpetuals version, but we kind of look at this as a 6-year-long development roadmap where every prior version of IDEX was an iteration that got us more knowledge, more experience, made us better at developing these types of applications to the point where we're able to have the technical knowledge and the infrastructure and expertise to deliver the Layer 3 vision. So really excited for this summer, and can't wait to share more for you guys soon. And that's the main thing I had prepared in terms of the presentation.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Alex. Super stoked to hear about all the updates, and super stoked to see that even more people are here to join us. So, okay, now we're going to begin the Q&A section of the chat. So I've gone through some of the questions, and obviously some of the questions that you guys have asked have already been answered by Alex. I see some questions asking when launch and which chain, and my only answer to those questions will be please stay tuned for our comms, as we'll be announcing all of these things very, very shortly. So the first question that I think would be good for Alex or the rest of the team to answer, we have a liquidity question from Farmer Joe. How does IDEX aim to accomplish the deepest liquidity of any on-chain DEX?
Great question. We look at this as really having a two-prong strategy. So I guess first, the base idea is that the design of the application makes it easy for professional market makers to integrate. And there's a couple components that go into that. One is having a matching engine that is performant enough to accept and kind of receive and process all of the different transactions that market makers are sending. So order book DEXs, in particular, order books have to have that higher throughput. Approximately 1.5% to 2% of orders that are sent to an exchange actually get executed. So a lot of it is being able to accept both placement and cancellation of orders with enough speed and throughput that market makers can quote really tightly and really deeply, knowing that they have the ability to move those orders quickly should market conditions change. So that's one key component, is kind of an infrastructure piece. The second is on the format of our API. So we've done a lot of work benchmarking the existing APIs of all of our different competitors and all the different big exchanges in the market to make ours as standard as possible in terms of request and response format. The goal being to make it a low lift for market makers and those who want to provide liquidity to integrate. We also support a few different languages so that users who've developed things in different, either Python or some of the other alternatives are able to bring their existing infrastructure and as closely as possible plug it into the application. The second piece is on driving integrations and participation early on when the taker side of the equation, when the user base is still growing. And that's going to be a twofold process. So we're talking directly to some market makers about having them be kind of core market makers on the exchange in all conditions. And then we're also working on an open market making liquidity program that will analyze and essentially value or kind of score the liquidity, the quality of the liquidity on the exchange by market maker, and reward them in IDEX tokens based on how good that liquidity is. And it's essentially a function of uptime, how often are you in the book, how tight are the spreads, and how much liquidity are you quoting in terms of depth. So that's a formula that we've developed that's going to allow us to score and reward those who are providing better liquidity that's increasing the quality of the trading experience.
Wow. Thank you for that very detailed explanation from Alex. But it really is important about how we actually get to liquidity and how we're gonna drive this whole thing as the world's best trading engine. So just another question that I see that seems to be a question on actually the anatomy of a single trade. This is from Julian with an X. So he asks, will we have to sign a transaction on every trade action?
So the technical answer is yes. But this is where that delegated key concept comes into place. So the reason you want a signature for every transaction is because that's the only way that the smart contracts can know and validate that your wallet actually approved the transaction. That's key to keeping the experience non-custodial. If you didn't require a signature for every transaction, then the issue is you're making some assumptions about who is authorizing that transaction. And if it's not the user, then it brings control outside of the user. And that's not something that we want because that becomes custodial. The key, though, is this concept of delegated keys, which allow you to use a key that is stored either in your web browser, which means it's stored in an encrypted storage on your local device that allows the application to have you sign transactions without having to do the cumbersome part of transaction signing, meaning that step where your MetaMask or your browser wallet pops up, you have to click the buttons, click through the confirmations, set the gas price, all those components. Those won't exist. You'll click buy or sell, and it'll immediately go through, still accompanied by a signature that proves to the contracts that it came from your wallet.
Amazing. Great stuff. Okay. I see a lot of questions asking about when the launch will be actually taking place and whether May 22 will actually be happening or not. So maybe you'd like to address this one, Alex?
Yeah, so May 22 is probably a little too aggressive right now. And again, this is an interest of being more transparent about where things are. I think we put that date out a little over a month ago. And since then, we've identified a few additional things that came up either in the kind of final development process. So supporting EIP 712 is a great example of something that came up in the audits. We've actually been continuing this exploration of layer 3 in order to make the settlement cheaper, but also some of these things that we've been working with a few different market making partners to identify some things that they want to see in the platform at launch. Specific examples being that liquidity incentive program, as well as some guardrails in terms of validation around pricing that help protect both the liquidity on the exchange and traders from errant trade kind of input. So all of these things are features which we didn't know about or weren't intending to develop a month and a half ago. They've since come up and we feel they're important enough to include in the release, but that does have implications for the launch date. So, one thing we acknowledge we can do a better job at is communicating those as they come up, rather than kind of holding them for these, every couple of month updates. And that's something that we're working to kick off here with this town hall and with the weekly updates we'll be providing in the Discord.
Awesome. Thank you for that one. Okay, and then moving on, I see. Okay, here's a good one from Yasir the Brown Kryptonex. What type of partnerships could we be expecting with the new IDEX?
It's a good question. So our main focus is really on getting the market started and jump started. If you think about what is going to make the launch successful, we've got the technology, we've got the user experience that we think the market is demanding. We need to make sure that buyers and sellers show up at the same time. So those are the types of partnerships we're working on, things that can increase liquidity, whether that's partnerships with market makers or traders, or some of these solutions that are coming out that allow for more algorithmic based market making. So those are some of the exciting things that we're looking at. The second piece is driving takers and traders to come try the exchange and utilize that liquidity. So any partnership that we can see that would help drive usage and adoption. So we're looking at some of those products that allow for different kind of on-chain rewards, complete these different actions and you're able to get some sort of benefit. A lot of those things that we think will be able to bring users to the platform, expose them to the product, and if we've done our job, keep them around because they really like the user experience.
Awesome. No, everyone is super looking forward to this, especially myself. So yeah, unfortunately, guys, I think we are going to have to wrap this up for questions now. Don't worry though, any questions that haven't been answered will kind of be answered at the end by either someone in the chat, or you will probably see the answer to these questions in our comms as we move closer to our launch. So I think Manuel would like to jump in.
Yeah, I wanted to get myself into this a little bit just to say thank you to Anwar for hosting this. I know he's super humble and he didn't introduce himself at the beginning of this. And I just want to say he's our latest hire. He will be the primary host of this kind of events. Again, I want to say thank you for the great job he has done. Also for the help of support and the marketing team to put this together. We hope get more events moving forward. And yeah, guys, as probably you expect, we are going to be releasing this as a recording in a couple of days. So if you miss anything, you are going to be able to hear it on demand. And basically that's it, Anwar.
Amazing. No, thank you so much. Yeah, the team put in quite a bit of work into trying to plan these community town halls so that we make sure that everybody keeps coming and we can stay connected to everybody, because at the end of the day, we are all people and we're trying to build something awesome. So connection with our community is something that is really important to us. But on that note, a little bit of a call to action as we move forward into the future of IDEX. We are going to be dropping some extra freebies onto random participants of the Zeely community. So if you haven't been paying attention, we've got a campaign running on Zeely where you get rewarded for certain tasks, right? Currently, there is a top 10 type of leaderboard thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to give random rewards to people that aren't even in the leaderboard. Anybody that takes part in the Zeely quest whatsoever can have a chance to win a prize. So if you see it and you're like, oh, I have to do too many things to get in the top 10 to win, don't worry. You can do literally one thing and be viable for a type of reward, and a type of reward that may or may not lead to some pretty awesome things, such as a whitelist or something other than that also. So on that note, stay tuned to our comms for instructions on how to get onto the said whitelist. And just in case you thought we were done, as we have mentioned numerous times during this call, we're going to have reveals and drops literally pretty much every week, drops in information, some in prizes, but mostly in information, pretty much every week from now until the launch. So make sure you stay tuned to our comms. Make sure you keep attending our community town halls. The next one is going to be in 2 weeks. And yeah, thank you so much for everyone coming today. We are super happy with the turnout, super happy with the engagement and the questions. Thank you, everybody. And as mentioned, if you missed out or you want to tell your friends about this, this will be recorded and you will be able to watch it on a channel that Manuel or one of the community guys will let you know in the future. And for those guys that have won some popes, someone will be DMing you. That someone will be Carlo or Laura. Please don't allow anyone else to DM you, because that would be probably someone bad. But yeah, thanks you, everybody. We will see you all soon.